Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon. Thank you for making time on this Christmas Eve.
Good afternoon.
Well, let's start with the U.S., where the main indices overnight continued to rise for a third straight session. Issues like the Omicron variant and inflation seemingly pushed to the side for now, with some positive data about the economy. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, if you look at the U.S. market, NASDAQ jumped significantly higher. Pretty much all three indexes were rising quite rapidly. If you look at the overall market, it's been going up for the third straight session on Thursday, and S&P gained about 0.6%, finishing up at 4,726, which is a new closing record high. And also NASDAQ was up about 0.9%. Pretty much a lot of people were worried about the Omicron variant up until now. That could affect the economic growth to be much lower than expected. However, President Biden has said that the U.S. will not go back to lockdown, and that has triggered overall economic growth rate to be fairly reasonably good for next year, or sentiment at least to be improved regarding that. Also, if you look at the South African study, it confirms that the Omicron variant is much less severe than previous strains, even though it is much more infectious. The infection rates are much faster, much higher. However, though, once again, the severity is much less, and therefore people will continue to be doing economic activities despite the widespread of this new variant. If you look at also the data side, U.S. consumer spending has risen by for the sixth straight month. It is slightly slower than October. However, though, it continues to show that consumer spending is very good. Despite that, PC inflation, we're hitting 39 years of record high at 5.7%. Also, if you look at the jobless claims numbers, it also continues to be at below pre-pandemic levels last week. So therefore, overall labor market conditions seems to be reasonably good. So there is a concern about inflationary pressure. However, because of the domestic consumption being very strong, we think that the U.S. market in a good position to be showing a Santa rally or New Year rally in the future.
Right, and Korean stocks higher today, too, on that optimism. Again, shares of the big chip makers closing higher. Samsung Electronics around 80,000 won now. The KOSPI at 3,000 points. Tell us about the domestic market.
Yes, if you look at the KOSPI, it was up by about 0.4%, and KOSDAQ was up by 0.3%. Now, KOSPI has closed above 3,000 level, and also KOSDAQ remains to be above 1,000 level. So all in all, the condition seems to be in a good, in the right direction. That market is rising trend. However, though, the level of the rise seems to be quite less or timid relative to U.S. market. Main reason for that is because if you look at the major supporter of the Korean market has been retail investors, but they've been the major seller of the Korean equity market in the last 1 month plus. And even today, if you look at the numbers, the retail investors sold about over 1.1 trillion won worth of Korean equities, and also KOSDAQ, they sold over 400 billion won worth of equities. That is quite a significant size of net selling. And why is that happening is because of the capital gains tax. Unless they sell some of these equity holdings, they have to pay capital gains tax. And therefore, this kind of net selling by the local investors of high net worth individuals would continue to happen probably until right before the 28th of this month. So this is the reason why the local market has not shown a strong upward momentum despite the U.S. market is rising quite rapidly. However, though, on a fundamental basis, not on a liquidity basis, it looks quite good in that if you look at Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, all are showing a promising futures through M&As as well as entering new businesses, particularly for the system semiconductor businesses or foundry business for Samsung, and Hynix purchasing another company and getting approval. So all that seems to be indicating that Korea is in good position for this semiconductor super cycle that's happening right now. So therefore, we think that short-term volatility could continue to happen, but on the 28th of this month, we think that the local investor will be coming back and equity will be in a good position to further rise in the future.
That's a really interesting insight about the practical side of the Korean market here. And zooming out a bit, the Bank of Korea indicated that it's going ahead with plans in the new year to keep raising rates as a way to keep inflation and household debt in check. It sees inflation in the 2% range next year. It also sees supply-related cost pressure continuing, though. What's the outlook at the Bank of Korea and your view?
Yes, if you look at the BOK's action, they have raised interest rate twice already this year. And they're saying that they will be doing further rate hike next year, probably around territory of twice of raising rates. So if that is the case, BOK is continuing to be worried about how U.S. Fed will be raising interest rate 3 times next year. So I guess the speed and the size of the raising interest rate, Korea is expected to be higher and faster than U.S. Now, main reason for that is because of the monetary policy is cautious about the inflation pressure. The country's inflation will run well above 2% target range next year, and BOK have expressed concern over the intensifying upward pressure from the global supply disruptions, and as well as the rebound in consumption as the vaccine and drugs are really probably working regarding the COVID-19, and that overall economic growth rate globally should be normalizing next year. So BOK is a bit more hawkish, even so, than U.S. This kind of trend should continue to happen. If you look at the consumer price in November, it jumped by 3.7%, clearly much higher than inflationary target for BOK. So BOK will be continue to be showing this type of a tighter monetary policy trend next year. However, though, if you look at the speed of raising interest rate, it's only twice per year, which is a fairly stable and slow pace. We don't think that the Korea's interest rate is going to hit above 3% anytime soon. So therefore, continuously, despite the raising rate environment, we are in a low interest rate environment. Only concern is about retail consumer debt as a percentage of GDP, but the government continues to be quite tight about this. And also, if you look at the loan-to-value ratio of a lot of these loans, it is very low. So we're not too worried and too concerned about the consumer debt at the current point in time.
And finally, Mr. Yu, the hydrogen economy. Korea is a leader, of course, in hydrogen fuel cell technology. And this week, the government launched a trial run of hydrogen trucks in the logistics industry. These trucks made by Hyundai Motor. They want to have 10,000 hydrogen trucks on the roads by the end of the decade. What can you tell us about this project or the importance of hydrogen-powered logistics? Yes,
if you look at the South Korean government, they have said that they'll be backing the hydrogen in order to achieve the carbon neutrality aims. And they're saying that 10,000 units of fuel cell vehicles for cargo delivery on the road by 2030. As we know, the so-called carbon zero strategy that is happening on a global scale, and Korea needs to be followed quite aggressively in regards to this. Most of the other countries are focusing on the electric cars, the EV side. And Korea is also going to that direction. And even the Hyundai Motors have decided, and they said that there will be really no longer will be putting money into the development of the gasoline-based engines, but rather they will be focusing on these type of electricity-related engines, so EV vehicles and hydrogen vehicles. So all that means is that it will be transitioning from gasoline-based to the electric-based vehicles. And obviously, it is much easier to do hydrogen-related ones for the trucks rather than the passenger vehicles. So I think that this is a good direction and a good target. If we are successful of this kind of hydrogen truck, then that should be one of the leading countries in regards to this type of businesses. We'll see how much of the advising or I guess support that government will be given to Korean transportation makers, the vehicle makers, and if this is something that can be achieved, if you look at Hyundai Group as a whole, they're targeting to be number 3 car maker in regards to the electric vehicles over the next 10 to 20 years of period. If Hyundai can achieve such number 3 in terms of market share, then that will be incredibly attractive in terms of the valuations. So we'll see how government and Hyundai kind of work together to achieve that target of getting that the hydrogen-related cars 10,000 units by 2030.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you, as always, for sharing your insights with us. Merry Christmas to you and yours.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.